"Hey you," he barked, addressing the players. "Stop the game." The players froze, the ball rolling to the edge of the court. Tay, the teen in the red tank top, rested his hands on his knees, breathing heavily. He looked up at the officers, his gaze cautious but not fearful. "What's the problem, officer?" he asked calmly. "We got a complaint about noise," replied the burly officer, whose badge read Ryan. His tone was sharp, his eyes narrowed. "And I see you're damaging property." "Damaging property?" Tay echoed, his voice trembling with disbelief. "We're just playing basketball." "Don't talk back," snapped the second officer, a leaner man with graying hair. "Show me your ID." Michael felt his fists clench. He stood behind the fence, partially hidden in the shadow of an old oak tree, but he saw everything. The situation was escalating for no reason. The kids on the court looked confused, some stepping back, others exchanging glances, unsure what to do. Tay slowly reached for his pocket, but Ryan lunged forward. "Slow down, kid," he growled, his hand tightening on his holster. "I'm just getting my phone. It's got a photo of my ID," Tay said quietly, but his voice shook. He was calm but tense, like a taut wire. "You think you're smart." Ryan grabbed Tay's arm and twisted it sharply. The boy winced in pain, but didn't resist. The crowd gasped. Some spectators started recording on their phones, but most stood silent, paralyzed by fear. Michael felt his blood pound in his temples. He knew this script, knew it too well. This wasn't about noise or complaints. It was about power, prejudice, and a system that let people like Ryan feel untouchable. But instead of rushing forward with shouts, Michael took a deep breath. He knew aggression would only make things worse. There had to be another way. He stepped out of the shadows and approached the fence, his movements calm but deliberate. The officers noticed him, but paid little mind, just another bystander. "Officer Ryan." Michael's voice was steady but loud enough to draw attention. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Ryan turned his head, his brows furrowing. "Who the hell are you?" he asked gruffly. "Just a guy who sees what's going on here," Michael replied, locking eyes with the officer. "And it looks to me like you're going a bit overboard." "Overboard?" Ryan let go of Tay's arm, but his stance remained aggressive. "This isn't your business, buddy. Move along." "I'd love to," Michael said, his voice still calm but with a steely edge. "But I can't just stand by and watch you intimidate a kid for playing basketball." Tay stood silently, his eyes darting between Michael and the officers. The other kids on the court froze, sensing the situation could go either way. The crowd began to whisper, some recording, but no one dared intervene. "You know who I am." Ryan took a step closer to the fence, his face reddening with anger. "I'm a police officer, and I'm keeping order here." "And I'm Michael B. Jordan," Michael said quietly but clearly, removing his cap. His face became visible, and a murmur rippled through the crowd. Some recognized him, but Michael ignored it. "And I know keeping order doesn't mean humiliating people for no reason." Ryan froze. His partner, the one with gray hair, looked confused but stayed silent. Michael continued, his voice calm but piercing. "This kid, Tay, hasn't done anything illegal. You say you got a complaint? Fine, check it out." But twisting his arm and intimidating him in front of everyone, that's not about order. That's about something else. And we all see it. Silence fell over the court. Even the ball, accidentally nudged by someone, stopped, thudding against the asphalt. Ryan looked caught off guard. He wasn't used to someone speaking to him like this calmly, but with such conviction. "You think you can just show up here and tell me how to do my job?" Ryan finally spat, but his voice wasn't as loud. "I'm not telling you how to do your job," Michael replied. "I'm asking you to think about why you're doing it this way. And I'm recording everything that's happening here." He pulled out his phone and showed he was filming. "And I'm sure your boss will want to see this. Maybe the local press, too." Ryan paled. His partner placed a hand on his shoulder, as if to calm him. "Let's go, Ryan," the partner said quietly. "We'll deal with the complaint later." Ryan shot Michael a venomous glare, but stepped back. The officers returned to their cars, and the crowd erupted in whispers and cheers. Tay stood rubbing his wrist, his eyes filled with a mix of relief and disbelief. Michael approached him. "You okay?" he asked. Tay nodded, but his voice shook. "They're always like this. They show up, hassle us. Last week, they took my friend's ball, said he looked suspicious. It's just..." He trailed off, looking down. Michael put a hand on his shoulder. "I know, but this isn't the end. We're going to make them answer for this. I promise." Michael felt dozens of eyes on him. The crowd hadn't dispersed. People whispered, recorded videos, some even edged closer to get a better look. He knew his presence had already shifted the dynamic of this evening, but the situation was far from resolved. The police had left, but Michael knew men like Ryan didn't back down easily. If he wanted this moment to be more than a fleeting spark, he had to act fast. "Tay," Michael said, turning to the teen who still held his wrist. Though he looked calmer now. "Tell me what's been going on here. This isn't the first time, is it?" Tay sighed, his eyes dropping to the ground. He kicked a small pebble on the asphalt. "They come here once a week, sometimes more. Always find a reason: noise, suspicious behavior. Last month, they took my friend Jay to the station because he looked like someone they were after. He's 15. Man." His voice trembled with anger, but he held it in. "We just want to play. This is our court. But they make us feel like criminals." Michael listened, nodding. Behind Tay stood another kid, a bit older, with dreads tied into a tight braid. He introduced himself as Quan. "And it's not just here," Quan added, his voice lower, calmer, but laced with suppressed rage. "At school, in stores, everywhere. They look at us like we've already stolen something. And if you try to say anything, you're aggressive, and they haul you off." Michael felt a knot tighten in his chest. He knew that feeling, knew what it was like to be judged before you even opened your mouth. But he also knew anger alone wouldn't change anything. They needed a plan. "Listen," he said, looking at Tay, Quan, and the other kids who'd gathered closer. "What happened today can't happen again. But to change it, we need facts. Names of the officers, dates, what they did. You say this happens all the time? Okay, we'll collect it all. And I promise you, I won't let this go." Tay looked at him with skepticism. "For real? I mean, I know who you are, but why do you care? You could just walk away." Michael smiled, but there was no lightness in his eyes. "Because I've been in your shoes, Tay. And I've seen what happens when people stay quiet. This court is your home, and no one should make you feel like an outsider in your own home." The kids exchanged glances. Quan nodded, as if making a decision. "All right, I'll talk to the others. We'll put together everything we remember. But what's next?" "Next, I'll reach out to people who can help," Michael said. "Lawyers, activists, journalists. But I don't want this to look like a show. This is about you, about your neighborhood. You ready to speak up if it comes to that?" Tay straightened, his shoulders squaring. "I'm ready." "Me too," Quan added, and a few other kids raised their hands. Michael nodded, feeling something new stir within him, not just anger or a desire for justice, but a belief that change was possible. But he also knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Officers like Ryan didn't act alone. They were backed by a system that didn't like being challenged. The next day, Michael sat in his hotel room, where he was staying during the shoot. A notebook with scribbled notes lay on the table, his phone buzzing with messages. He'd already contacted a friend, a civil rights lawyer from New York, who promised to come to Philly in a few days. Michael had also sent the video from the court to a local journalist he knew from past projects. She was known for digging deep, even when it involved the police. But most importantly, Tay had sent a list. The kids hadn't wasted time. The message detailed 8 incidents over the past 3 months. Dates, officers' names, descriptions of what happened. Some stories were like yesterday's intimidation, baseless ID checks. Others were worse. One kid got bruises after being accidentally shoved against a wall. Another was detained overnight without explanation. Michael reread the list, each line adding weight to his resolve. He knew that if this went public, Ryan and his partner would be just a piece of a bigger conversation. But he also knew men like Ryan didn't go down without a fight. And if they found out Michael was digging into them, things could escalate. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was his assistant, Gina, who'd come with him for the shoot. "Mike, you asked me to check on Ryan?" She placed a folder with a few pages in front of him. "I talked to a contact in Philly. Officer Thomas Ryan, 42, been on the force for 15 years. He's got a few complaints for excessive force, but nothing major, either settled or dismissed. His partner, Stephen Crow, stays under the radar, but they're often seen together." Michael skimmed the documents. It all added up. Ryan was the textbook example of someone who knew how far he could push without crossing the line into real trouble. But this time, he'd crossed it. "Gina, get in touch with our lawyer. I want him to look at these complaints. And I need a contact in the city council. If we're going to get this to Ryan's boss, we need backup." Gina nodded, but her eyes held concern. "Mike, you sure about this? I get why you're doing it, but you know how this could turn out. The press, the headlines, and if they start digging into you." Michael sighed. She was right. His name could draw attention to the issue, but it could also make him a target. One wrong move, and the story could turn into a circus, overshadowing Tay and the other kids. "I know," he said quietly, "but I can't just walk away. Not this time." Meanwhile, back at the West Philly court, the vibe was different. The kids played, but with less enthusiasm. Rumors that Michael B. Jordan was taking on their cause spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Some thought it wouldn't change anything, but others, especially the younger ones, looked at Tay and Quan with newfound respect. They'd become the ones who dared to speak up. But not everyone was thrilled. At a local bar where cops often hung out after shifts, Ryan sat at the counter, gripping a beer bottle. His face was grim, his eyes glinting with anger. "This actor thinks he can just roll in and tell us how to do our jobs," he muttered to Crow, who sat beside him. "I've been in this uniform 20 years. 20, and he's what, shooting movies and playing hero." Crow, as usual, was more reserved. "Easy, Tom. He'll make some noise and leave. Guys like him don't stick around." "No," Ryan snapped, his fingers tightening around the bottle. "He recorded us, and I heard he's already calling people. If this gets to the brass, we're done." Crow frowned. "So what's your plan? Threaten him?" "Tom, this is Michael B. Jordan. If anything happens to him, we're buried." Ryan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "No need for threats. There are other ways to remind people who's in charge." He finished his beer and tossed the bottle into the trash with such force it shattered. The bar fell silent, but no one dared say a word. Michael stood by the hoop, holding a megaphone borrowed from a local activist, Mr. Thompson, a gray-haired man in his 60s who'd once coached a youth basketball team. Beside Michael were Tay and Quan, their faces serious but their eyes burning with determination. Over the past 3 days, Michael, the kids, their friends, and a few local activists had gathered enough evidence. Testimonies, videos, even old complaints against Officer Ryan that someone in the police department had misplaced. The journalist Michael had contacted was preparing a story, and the New York lawyer had arrived in Philly, working on a formal complaint to the police department. But Michael knew that wasn't enough. Real change didn't start in offices. It started here, among people who felt injustice every day. He raised the megaphone to his lips, and the crowd fell silent. "Good evening." His voice was calm but strong, like the thud of a ball on asphalt. "I'm standing here not because I'm an actor or someone special. I'm here because I saw a police officer intimidate a teenager for playing basketball. And I know this isn't a one-off. You all know it." The crowd murmured. Someone shouted, "That's right." Michael continued, "Tay, Quan, and many others have told me what's been happening on this court, in this neighborhood. And I believe them. But I also believe we can change this. Not with shouts or fists, but with the truth. We've gathered evidence. We're talking to people who can hold the guilty accountable. But I want you to know, this isn't my fight. It's our fight." He lowered the megaphone and looked at Tay. The boy clenched his fists nervously, but stepped forward when Michael handed him the megaphone. I'm not big on speaking in front of people," Tay began, his voice shaky but resolute. "But I'm tired of being scared. Tired of being stopped for no reason, called suspicious, just because of how I look. I want my little brothers to play here without worrying someone's gonna take them away for nothing." His words hit the crowd like a punch. Some clapped, others shouted support. Michael put a hand on Tay's shoulder, feeling pride for him. Then Quan took the megaphone. "We're not asking for much," he said, his voice firmer. "We're asking for respect. And if officers like Ryan think they can do whatever they want, they're wrong. Because now, we're not staying quiet." The crowd erupted in applause. Michael felt goosebumps on his skin. This was the moment when words became something more, a movement. Meanwhile, at the police precinct, the atmosphere was different. Ryan sat in his captain's office, his face red with anger and anxiety. Captain Green, a stern-faced man with 20 years of experience, flipped through a folder of complaints that had come in over the past 2 days. The video from the court, published by the local journalist, had already racked up tens of thousands of views online. The precinct's phones hadn't stopped ringing, reporters, activists, even city council members. "Tom, do you realize what you've dragged us into?" Green tossed the folder onto the desk. "You knew Michael B. Jordan was there and still decided to play tough guy?" "I didn't know who he was," Ryan muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "And what? Now I'm the bad guy because some actor decided to make a show of it." "This isn't a show," Green snapped. "It's a problem. We've got 5 testimonies, 2 videos, and a formal complaint from a civil rights group. And that's just the start. If you think I'm covering for you, you're wrong." Ryan clenched his fists, but stayed silent. He knew his connections at the precinct wouldn't help this time. Crow, his partner, had already distanced himself, claiming he didn't see everything that happened. Ryan was alone. A week later, Michael sat in a small West Philly community center where a meeting was held with police department representatives, city council members, and neighborhood residents. The room was packed. Elderly women in bright headscarves, young parents with kids, teens from the basketball court. Tay and Quan sat in the front row, their faces tense but hopeful. Michael spoke first, recounting what he'd seen and passing the floor to the lawyer, who presented the evidence. Then Tay, Quan, and a few other kids shared their stories. Their voices, initially quiet, grew steadier. The room listened in silence, broken only by occasional cheers or soft sobs. When it was the police representative's turn, Captain Green stood. His face was stern, but his voice carried sincerity. "I won't make excuses for what happened," he said. "Officer Ryan has been suspended, and an investigation is underway. We're also reviewing complaints against other officers and implementing a new training program for our staff. I know it's not enough, but it's a start." The crowd stirred. Someone shouted, "What about the others?" Some clapped. Michael felt the tension in the room mix with cautious optimism. He knew Green's words were just words, but they were a first step, and the fact that Ryan would no longer patrol these streets was a victory. Weeks later, Michael stood on the same basketball court, holding a ball. The sun baked the asphalt again, but the atmosphere was lighter. The kids played, laughing and teasing each other. Tay sank a shot and turned to Michael with a grin. "You gonna play with us?" he asked. Michael laughed. "You think I still got it?" He tossed the ball, and it sailed smoothly into the hoop. The kids hooted. Someone shouted, "Yo, the old man's still got game." Michael looked at the court, at the kids' faces, at the people on the benches enjoying the evening. He knew the fight wasn't over. The system didn't change overnight, and Ryan was just part of a bigger problem. But here, on this court, something had shifted. The kids no longer looked over their shoulders in fear. They played, laughed, lived. He pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. Tay mid-jump, the ball in the air, the sun setting on the horizon. This wasn't the end of the story, but it was a moment he wanted to remember. A moment when a small step became the start of something bigger. Michael joined the game, but a thought lingered. If we can change this court, maybe we can change more. And with that, he passed the ball, his heart beating in rhythm with the thuds on the asphalt.